This is Chapter 7, Section 3, beginning on page 204, A New Plan of Government, American Diary. As Benjamin Franklin was leaving the last session of the Constitutional Congress, a woman asked, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" Franklin answered, "A republic, if you can keep it." He meant that in order to maintain a republic, a system of government in which the people elect representatives to exercise power for them, citizens must take an active role. Roots of the Constitution. Main idea. As the framers wrote the Constitution, they borrowed ideas from other political systems and philosophers of the Enlightenment. History in you. Has a person influenced you to do better in school or participate in an activity that helps others? Read to learn about the ideas and thinkers who helped shape the Constitution. After 4 long and difficult months, Franklin and the other delegates had produced a new Constitution. The document provided the framework for a strong central government for the United States. Although a uniquely American document, the Constitution has roots in many other civilizations. The delegates studied and discussed the history of political thought at length, starting with ancient Greece, so that their new government could avoid the mistakes of the past. Many ideas found in the Constitution came from the study of European political institutions and political writers. British ideas and institutions influenced the delegates. The framers who shaped the document were familiar with the parliamentary system of Britain, and many had participated in the colonial assemblies or their state assemblies. They valued the individual rights guaranteed by the British judicial system. Although the Americans broke away from Britain, they respected many British traditions or cultural beliefs and practices. European influences. The English Magna Carta of 1215 placed limits on the power of the monarchy, England's lawmaking body. Parliament emerged or became known as a force that the monarch had to depend on to pay for wars and to finance the royal government. Like Parliament, the colonial assemblies controlled their colonies' funds. For that reason, the assemblies had some control over colonial governors. The English Bill of Rights of 1689 provided another model for Americans. Many Americans felt that the Constitution also needed a Bill of Rights. The framers of the Constitution believed in the ideas about the nature of people and government promoted by European writers of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a movement of the 1700s that promoted knowledge, reason, and science as a means of improving society. James Madison and other architects of the Constitution were familiar with the work of John Locke and Baron de Montesquieu, 2 philosophers of the Enlightenment. Locke, an English philosopher, believed that all people have natural rights. These natural rights include the rights to life, liberty, and property. In his 2 treatises of civil government, 1690, he wrote that government is based on an agreement or contract between the people and the ruler. Many Americans interpreted natural rights to mean the rights of Englishmen defined in the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights. The framers viewed the Constitution as a contract between the American people and their government. The contract protected the people's natural rights by limiting the government's power. In the Spirit of Law, 1748, the French writer Montesquieu declared that the powers of government should be separated and balanced against each other. This separation would prevent any single person or group from gaining too much power. The powers of government should also be clearly defined and limited to prevent abuse. Following the ideas of Montesquieu, the framers of the Constitution carefully specified and divided the powers of government. The federal system. The Constitution created a federal system of government that divided powers between the national or federal government and the states. In the Articles of Confederation, the states held most powers. Under the Constitution, the states gave up some powers to the federal government and kept others. Federalism, or sharing power between the federal and state governments, is one of the distinctive features of the United States government. Under the Constitution, the federal government gained broad powers to tax, regulate trade, control the currency, raise an army, and declare war. It could also pass laws that were necessary and proper for carrying out its responsibilities. This power allowed Congress to make laws as needed to deal with new situations. The Constitution, however, left important powers in the hands of the states. The states had the power to regulate trade within their borders. They also could establish local governments and schools and set marriage and divorce laws. The Constitution also allows for power to be shared between the federal and state governments. Both federal and state governments have the power to tax and administer criminal justice. The supreme law of the land. The Constitution and laws that Congress passed were to be, quote, the supreme law of the land, close quote. No state could make laws or take actions that went against the Constitution. Any dispute between the federal government and the states was to be settled by the federal courts on the basis of the Constitution. Under the new federal system, the Constitution became the final and supreme authority. Reading check, describing what is the principle of federalism. The new government, main idea. The Constitution divides the Constitution divides and limits power among the three branches of government. History and you. Do you think government leaders should be limited to what they can or cannot do? Read about the division of powers and responsibilities of government. Montesquieu's idea of a division of powers led the framers to divide the federal government into three branches, legislative, executive, and judicial. The first three articles, or parts of the Constitution, describe each branch's power and responsibilities. Branches of government. Article 1 of the Constitution establishes Congress as the legislative branch or lawmaking branch of the government. Congress is composed of the House of Representatives and the Senate. As a result of the Great Compromise between large and small states, each state's representation in the House is proportional to its population. Representation in the Senate is equal, 2 senators for each state. The powers of Congress include collecting taxes, coining money, and regulating trade. Congress also can declare war and raise and support armies. Finally, it makes all laws needed to fulfill its functions, as stated in the Constitution. Memories of King George III's rule made some delegates reluctant to establish a powerful executive or ruler. Others believe that the Articles of Confederation failed, in part because it lacked an executive branch. They argued that a strong executive would limit the power of Congress. Article 2 of the Constitution established the executive branch headed by the President to carry out the nation's laws and policies. The President serves as Commander-in-Chief of the armed forces and conducts relations with foreign countries. The President and a Vice President are elected by a special group called the Electoral College, made of presidential electors. Each state's voters select electors to cast their votes for the President and Vice President. Every state has the same number of electors as it has senators and representatives in Congress. The President and Vice President serve a 4-year term. Article 3 deals with the judicial branch or court system. The nation's judicial power resides or exists in one Supreme Court and any other lower federal courts that Congress might establish. The Supreme Court and the federal courts hear cases involving the Constitution, laws passed by Congress, and disputes between states. System of checks and balances. The framers built in a system of checks and balances. Each branch has ways to check or limit the power of the others so that no single branch can dominate the government. Both the House and the Senate must pass a bill for it to become law. The President can check Congress by vetoing or rejecting the bill. Congress can check the President by overriding or voting down the veto. To override a veto, 2/3 of the members of both houses must vote for the bill. The system of checks and balances also applies to the Supreme Court. The President appoints Supreme Court justices and the Senate must approve the appointments. Over time, the court has become a check on Congress and the President by ruling on the constitutionality of laws and presidential acts. This system has kept a balance of power among the branches and has limited abuses. National citizens. The Constitution created citizens who choose their officials directly or indirectly. Officials answer to the people rather than to the states. The new government pledged to protect the personal freedoms of its citizens. Americans showed the world that it was possible for a people to change its form of government through discussion and choice, rather than through chaos, force, or war. The world watched the new nation to see if its experiment in self-government really would work. Reading check. Explaining, what is the purpose of the first 3 articles of the Constitution? Debate and adoption. Main idea. After a much heated debate, the states ratified the Constitution. History in You. How do some people influence a group's decisions more than others? Read how influential leaders helped ratify the Constitution. The delegates produced the Constitution, but before it could go into effect, 9 states had to ratify or approve it. A great debate then took place throughout the country. In newspapers, at meetings, and in ordinary conversations, Americans discussed the arguments for and against the new Constitution. Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Supporters of the new Constitution were called Federalists. Federalists enjoyed the support of 2 of the most respected men in America, George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. Gifted political thinkers James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay also backed the Constitution. Madison, Hamilton, and Jay wrote a series of essays explaining and defending the Constitution. These essays appeared in newspapers around the country. Called the Federalist Papers, they were later published as a book and sent to delegates at the state conventions. Jefferson called the essays the best commentary on the principles of government which was ever written. People who opposed the Constitution were called Anti-Federalists. Anti-Federalists responded to the Federalists by writing their own essays, now known as the Anti-Federalist Papers. Their main argument was that the strong national government created by the Constitution would take away the liberties Americans had fought for in the war against Great Britain. The government would ignore the will of the states and the people and favor the wealthy few over the common people. Anti-Federalists favored local government that was controlled more closely by the people. A central government, they feared, would be made of a small group of individuals. They agreed with Patrick Henry, who warned that the Constitution was incompatible with or contrary to the genius of republicanism. Protecting rights. Perhaps the strongest criticism of the Constitution was that it lacked a Bill of Rights to protect individual freedoms. Several state conventions announced that they would not ratify it without the addition of a Bill of Rights. Mercy Otis Warren expressed the problem. Primary source. Quote, "We have struggled for liberty and made costly sacrifices, and there are still many among us who value liberty too much to relinquish the rights of man for the dignity of government." From a letter to Katharine Graham. The Federalists feared disorder without a strong central government. Anti-Federalists worried about the oppression that might result if power was concentrated in a central government. Adopting the Constitution. On December 7th, 1787, Delaware became the first state to approve the Constitution. By June 21st, 1788, the 9th state, New Hampshire, ratified it. In theory, that meant the new government could go into effect. However, without the support of the 2 largest states, New York and Virginia, the future of the new government was bleak. In Virginia, Patrick Henry charged that the Constitution did not sufficiently limit the power of the central government. Still, Virginia ratified the Constitution after being assured that it would include a Bill of Rights amendment. An amendment is something added to a document. The Bill of Rights would be added in 1791. In July 1788, New York finally ratified the Constitution, followed by North Carolina in November 1789 and Rhode Island in May 1790. The nation celebrated its new government. Reading check, explaining why was it important that New York and Virginia ratify the Constitution? Section 3 review. Question 1, vocabulary set. Define the following. Tradition, federalism, legislative branch, executive branch, electoral college, judicial branch. Reside, checks and balances, amendment. Main ideas. Number 2, identifying. What features of the Constitution developed from the ideas of Baron de Montesquieu? Number 3, explaining. Why does the Constitution divide power among branches of government? Number 4, specifying. Why did Virginia eventually ratify the Constitution? And the final question, the essential question, what ideas and features are found in the United States Constitution? That concludes Chapter 7, Section 3.